I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Let me make an announcement before we get started. We haven't posted any more of the Mr. Black pieces yet because the audio, it's not working on people's phones is what we found out. If you listen to it on a computer, you can hear it better. But Tom, I think you found out there was some issues with hearing it on phones. So what we're going to do is
the audio's, it's not the same on the phone.
So what I did is I have a transcript of it, and our reader is going to read that for us. So he should be doing that this week sometime. And then what we'll do, instead of posting short pieces, we'll probably post 2 1-hour pieces with that. So that's what we're doing with that, folks. Tom, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to welcome, we have some new Patreons. So I want to welcome Tameek, Anastasia, and Karim. Thank you, guys. And also, if you like the show, let us know. Let the algorithm know. Click the like and the subscribe button. And, of course, if you want to become a Patreon and support the show, you can do that for as little as $1 a month. And with that, I think we're ready to jump in with some excellent questions.
All right. Now, Chuck is joining us. Chuck, you're going to be a regular on here. Maybe we should have you as a regular.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That'd be nice.
Do you or Forrest have any updates that are going on, or should we just jump into the questions?
Well, I did have a little expedition down in Honeby.
Oh, tell us about it.
About 2 weeks ago. Me and Mary Fabian, that she runs Pennsylvania Bigfoot, she and her sister drove all the way from Pennsylvania down to Oklahoma, and we stayed in my buddy's cabin down there and went to several different areas and found some structures, some wood structures. Mary actually took a picture one first day that we got there, and she sent a bunch of pictures back to her people in Pennsylvania, and one of them said, "I think you caught something on one of your pictures." And sure enough, we started looking at it, and we think it was the female that comes around the cabin quite a bit. And she was actually looking over a ridgeline toward us, looking at us, and all you could see was her head. It was like she was laying on the ground. And we went back there a couple of days later to look at the spot, and the blackness that we saw that was laying there wasn't there. So we're almost pretty sure that she actually caught a picture. We had some pretty interesting stuff. The first night we were there, I had a bionic ear that I was listening to with a recorder. And I think I recorded some footsteps coming up around the cabin. And the last night that we were there, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we actually had some yells and screams outside the cabin, which is a pretty eye-opening experience when it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And right after they screamed and yelled at us, they started throwing rocks at the cabin. And I had a audio recorder sitting out there, so I haven't had a chance to look through my audio yet. And but I'm pretty sure I captured a bunch of that stuff that was going on. But it was a pretty good experience. They've now actually put a Bigfoot museum about 14 or 15 miles from where we were at. And we actually got to go to the Bigfoot museum, and we were the only ones in there other than the owners. Got to meet the owners and everything. And that was pretty interesting. and they actually want me to do a speaking engagement down there probably in mid-December. I'll go down there, and she said there's usually about 40 to 45 people that show up for those. So this is going to be my first speaking engagement to the public, so I'm pretty excited about it. But we had a real good time. A lot of good things happened while we were there, and saw some pretty good tree structures and breaks and arches and stuff like that out in the woods, and so we had a pretty good little visit there.
Chuck, I want to say we're going to, for our listeners out there, we're going to have Mary Fabian on in the future here before too long, and get some updates from her. So you guys keep an eye out for that. That'll be interesting.
One other thing we experienced while we were there on the very last night when we were having all the activity that happened at the cabin, we actually heard footsteps come up on the front deck, and the doorknob jingled while we were sitting there listening. And so either her or another one was trying to come in the front door, and lucky for us, we kept the door locked. So,
that's pretty interesting.
And that's actually happened several times there. I've heard that before, and then I think I probably told you guys about the time that the guys that were down there woke up one morning and the front door was wide open because they forgot to lock the door, and I'm pretty sure she probably come into the cabin and looked around and to see what was going on. I've heard stories of that kind of stuff happening at Girl Scout camps and Boy Scout camps. And
Chuck, let me ask you real quick,
Sure.
just for our listeners out there. So we want to eliminate every other possibility. This wasn't a person, some indigent or just some prankster coming up and wiggling the doorknob. Were you guys like in a remote area? Did anybody know you were there? That sort of thing.
The only people that knew that we were there were the guy who is a good friend of mine that owns the cabin. He knew we were there, and they have a little cafe type place down the road, and they have really good food there, and they actually serve a Bigfoot cheeseburger, which is really good. But anyway, she knew that we were there, but this was not a prankster. Where the cabin is several miles down the road, and there's nobody around that area. There's no houses around that area. The closest house is a mile down the road, which is where the siege of Honabi took place, was just a mile down the road from where we were. And but no, this wasn't a prankster. There's no houses or anything or other cabins in the area. So and like I said, most of the time when the activity happens there is usually around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. That seems to be the right time frame to be there. And I'm sure they come around the cabin during the day, but they don't really announce themselves until it gets early in the morning. So,
well, that kind of makes sense, especially with the time frame. That perfectly dovetails with everything else we've heard and will with our experiences with these creatures here in Oregon. Okay, so I'm going to jump in with the first question, and this one is from Karim. Thank you, Karim. She's got a lot of excellent questions today. And I got to say, Karim, great minds think alike here. I've thought about this as well, but there's some reasons maybe not. But anyway, here we go. Here's the question. Why didn't it occur to anyone to poison Bigfoot by baiting it with food containing lethal poison that can kill it quickly? Then voila, we have a body. LOL. I would do it, but just asking. Oh, she said, Karim says, I wouldn't do it, but just asking. Do you think it's been done before? And I think there's, dosage and what would you use and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to throw this out first off to Forrest. What are your thoughts?
Well, knowing humans, there's probably somebody that's probably attempted to do that. My problem with that is I think that's a cruel and unusual way to kill anything. And secondly, then you've got the problem with baiting something with poison that other animals, totally innocent animals, small, like raccoons, possums, even coyotes, wolves, whatever, would come up and possibly feed on and then thereby be affected. I wouldn't encourage anybody to do such as that because I think poison is a cruel and horrible way to kill anything. I've seen instances where monkeys have been killed that way, and it is not pleasant to watch them die. And I just would not even suggest or encourage anybody to do such a thing.
Well, and also there's also the question of, do we know what would work? And we probably, maybe the typical stuff, might work, but then you got dosage, and then you have the law of unintended consequence.
Well, here's a thought too. If they're watching when you put something out and they see one of their members of their group get poisoned and die or severely sick, they're fairly intelligent animals, so there's going to be a little bit of retribution there to whoever does that.
That's a good point, and that's one of those unintended consequences. So, Karim, I hadn't thought about poisoning, but Will and I I've talked about maybe putting other substances in there to alter their state of mind. But again,
not a good idea
especially
either.
With right, with what you just said, Will. That's the only exception might be if you were to put a barrel of wine out there. Who knows? Maybe they'd love it, but hard to say. Okay, so
I don't think I'd want a drunk one around either.
Right?
Isn't there a
that
story
would
about something like that? I'm getting into it.
What do you think, Chuck?
Still or something?
Well, I kind of agree with what Forrest said, but you also got to think about, if somebody was wanting to try to do something, what kind of dosage would you put out there? And if the dosage was too weak, you'd be in a world of hurt, I would think.
Same with tranquilizing. You don't know what kind of a dosage.
Exactly. And if you did hurt it or something like that and not kill it, you're going to have some trouble on your hands.
Big problems.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't attest to that at all. I wouldn't do it.
Well, I'm going to point out an instance in an Indian village in India where their dogs there in that village attacked and killed a juvenile macaque. And the humans were standing around because the monkeys are obviously, they look at them as useless vermin. And they were filming the incident, and I've seen the incident on film, and it's pretty, I have to skip through it because I can't even stand to watch and these are big adult dogs. Well, what ended up happening was the macaques also saw what happened. They saw what the humans did, which was basically nothing. They didn't call the dogs off. They didn't stop it. They were standing around laughing and filming. And you know what ended up happening was these macaques then organized themselves, and they came in and killed every dog in the village, even down to innocent little puppies, taking them up off of tall buildings and up in high trees. And I know that sounds dreadful. I wouldn't have wanted to have to watch that happen either, but they did it, and they killed every dog in that village.
That kind of goes back to the point I was making. If they were, and almost certain the Sasquatches would know, they'd be watching the person place whatever material out there that was poisoned, and they were much smarter than monkeys, so there could be some really bad problems.
Yeah, you might be creating a tsunami of vicious fury that you wouldn't even know what to do with.
And Will, that's a good point. Actually, even if they didn't see you do it, they would know if they got it from, especially if it was on your property. I think they'd connect the dots pretty quickly, even if they didn't connect the dots.
Yeah, because they're testy anyway.
Yeah, they're temperamental, and vindictive.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we'll lay that dog to rest, that question. But the next one here is from Chris. And Chris wants to know, he says, hey, I have a question. Does Sasquatch ever come into contact with mountain lions? And if they do, if so, do they fight?
I'm trying to remember. There's a story. I can't think of the specifics of it. And I am familiar with at least one story where they did, or they were hunting them, and the contact wouldn't be fighting; they'd be eating them.
Yeah, here's an example. Here's a thought. Fred up in Alaska had an experience where they had one of these things, albeit it was huge, probably a 14-footer. And he shot it in the chest 3 times with a 30-06 from very close range. So and it didn't kill it. It just, he heard it go thok, thok, thok in the chest. And I think it was a deterrent, if anything. So Sasquatch can handle a 30-06 center of mass at such a close range. I don't think a mountain lion would really offer much of a threat.
Well, Forrest, you've talked about this when we discussed, muscle and bone density with other large primates.
Yeah, the muscle density in chimpanzees and all the great apes, and I will exclude the gibbons from that because I really don't. I am not really that familiar with gibbons. I've never paid that much attention to them. I'm sorry. But your muscle density in your chimpanzees, your gorillas, and even your orangutans is so much denser, and the fibers are stronger than what you have in humans. We're really we're the naked ape, but we're the weaker of the species. So we're just not designed the way they are, and they can take a lot more. I mean, a gorilla is the strength of a gorilla is 20 times that of a human. And thank heavens they don't get vicious and upset like the chimpanzees do, because a chimpanzee they estimate to be 5 to 6 times the strength of a human. So those are the vicious apes, and along with humans, throw us in that group. So, yeah, the muscle density and bone density is much greater. They are great apes.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Didn't Thomas Seward, I think that's his name, in Vancouver, didn't he tell a story one time of where there was a grizzly bear that was kind of walking along the shoreline, and a Bigfoot showed up, and the grizzly bear took off running away from it?
Yeah, he did.
So I'm kind of have the thought that any kind of predator like that would have the same kind of attitude as the grizzly. They'd run away, I would think.
Yeah, they just wouldn't want to mess with them.
Right.
There's actually a story, and I'm going to go ahead and relay this story. This is actually in one of the Mr. Black recordings. It's one of the very, 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 very rare instances where it appeared that a Bigfoot was actually benevolent. Somebody was in a canoe, they had injured themselves severely, they had to crawl up on shore, and I'm just kind of trying to remember this story, but the long and the short of it is Sasquatch came to this person and they did something very strange. I don't know if it was one or more of them, but they urinated in about a 30-foot circumference around this guy, and then just walked away. And he's like, what's this all about? And then that night, as he was trying to sleep, the predators would come in, the mountain lions, the wolves, and they'd take a whiff of that and they'd say, this is not where we want to be, and they'd be gone. So it's just one of those odd stories.
Well, and something we know from other inside contacts besides that particular, and there's, I want to make sure that people know there are probably at least a half a dozen Mr. Blacks that I've been in touch with, and one of them said that they're not all. I mean, it's like people. There's going to be variations in behaviors. Yes, there are some that will go to the length of eating people, but there are others that don't, and they'll go out of their way to stay away from people. So it's possible that those variations could engage in behaviors like that would be more in line with, maybe doing something for a person rather than putting them on the menu.
Yeah, there's just a lot more study and understanding that needs to go into this topic. Okay, got a question here. This person says, I live in southern Manitoba, south of Brandon, and I think I saw some a few years back. So my first response before I finish the question is, if you think you saw some, shoot me an email. Shoot us an email. Same email address, questions@creekdevil.com. We'd like to hear a little more about your sighting. But he says, this really isn't an area for them. Do they travel through, or do you know if they migrate?
Without knowing much about the specific area, it's really hard telling. Typically, they have a range area. I mean, it depends on the part of the country, in the region and the lay of the land, what they're doing, because what they do, let's say here in the northwestern part of the country versus, say, where Chuck's at, and Forest, that's completely different kinds of behaviors.
Well, I'll throw this in there. I think that, especially down here in Oklahoma, I think they range in about a 40 mile radius, at least that, because if you got a family group in a certain area, obviously they're gonna take up a lot of food in that area. And so I think they have to migrate to certain different spots in certain parts of the country in certain times, to where they don't get rid of their food sources. I think that's a big thing for them, I believe.
Yeah, what I found in southern Washington, south of Mount St. Helens, there was one particular group that occupied a 3,000 plus square mile area, and they would rotate in a clockwise fashion throughout that area on a yearly basis. So, but it's not the same for every place.
Right.
So to answer this person's question is very possible. They may have been traveling through. I don't think they migrate in the sense that migratory animals do, but like what Chuck and Will just said, they'll move around for food sources. I kind of got to do that. All right, moving on. We have a question here. It says, Will, we spend a lot of time during the summer months in the Panther Creek, Goose Lake area in Skamania County. We're wondering if you've ever heard of anything from the thru hikers of any sightings. I've wondered that myself. Have any hikers ever contacted us with stories, hearing or seeing anything unusual? Thank you, Sharon.
Well, I spent a dozen years in that area when I lived in Vancouver, and I can tell you I found pretty fresh tracks up on Panther Creek. So, yeah, they are definitely in the area. As far as witnesses, I'd have to go back and, on my files and see who, and when we had those witnesses. But, yeah, definitely, that's a very active area.
And that's kind of a shout out to our audience. If anybody out there knows of, or if you're yourself, or either a section hiker or a through hiker on the PCT, and you've encountered one of these things, or you had something unusual you thought was unusual, and maybe you'd like to know a little bit more about it, shoot us an email, questions@creekdevil.com, and just let us know. This is in regards to the PCT. Okay, so we got a couple more here. Karim. Okay, and Karim wants to know. She says, I'm asking myself, do those creatures challenge each other or challenge themselves, sometimes appearing to people or what can get close to humans, then hiding? Do they have fun this way as a game? So in other words, I think what Karim is asking is it a game? And we've heard this, where do they have a game where they try to see how close they can get to somebody without being detected?
I would suspect the juveniles may do something like that. I don't think the adults would. What do you think, Forrest?
Well, I think I'd have to agree with you. Juveniles would probably do that. I couldn't see an adult. I can't see even an adult gorilla or chimpanzee doing anything like that. The juveniles are going to act just like juvenile humans and do stupid things. I think some of the antics that is going on at my house is probably nothing but juveniles doing, playing tricks on me. And they probably enjoy it, I can't see an adult. I think they got more serious things on their mind than, doing silly stuff.
I would think, too, since they know humans are dangerous, an adult would be much less likely to do something like that because they know the gravity of the situation.
Right. They know what the end result can end up being,
What do you think?
Well, and you think about it.
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to say, going back to human juveniles, they will do all sorts of, come on now, we all know, juvenile humans will do crazy things, and it's part of the growing up, part of the learning process. So I don't know, it kind of stands to reason that these guys would as well.
What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I've heard stories about the Native American Indians. They used to, when they would have other tribal tribes in the area, they would do what's called counting coup. And what they would do is they would sneak up on their enemy and steal feathers or stuff like that as to show their dominance. And I think in some aspects, like the juveniles, like you're talking about the juveniles, I think the juveniles do the same thing. And I think they do stuff like that. And it's just a game that they play, if you will.
I remember when you mentioned counting coup, I remember we've had Tom Seward on the show a couple of times, and he mentioned, Tom, if you remember, he said he did that to a Sasquatch, actually, to scare it.
He did. Yeah, he did. I'm not sure I'd want to do that.
No.
I think I'd pass.
All the reasons we just talked about earlier.
Well, listen, we're just about out of time on this segment, so any final thoughts, anyone, before we wrap this up?
Final thought is I want to thank everybody for your great questions. You keep the topic alive. You have questions, shoot them our way, questions@creekdevil.com, and we will air your questions on the show.
Every once in a while we'll see somebody comment in YouTube in the comment section about their encounters. Get a hold of us, please, if you've had an encounter. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap this, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.